character and is dedicated to serving the community. Okay, so let's take a look right here. We're just going to take a look at the video Beverne has prepared for us.
I've been the promised land.
On the campus of Morehouse College in Atlanta, a statue of Martin Luther King Jr. Nearby, a monument to another lesser-known Morehouse graduate, theologian and mystic Howard Thurman.
Until he is God throughout his creation.
Thurman had a profound spiritual impact on King and on many civil rights leaders. Yet for much of the last half-century, Thurman's contributions have often been overlooked.
Leaders like King do not arise out of a historical vacuum. Their movements and their other personalities who actually sow the seeds. Thurman is one of those persons who sows the seed. In fact, I don't believe you get a Martin Luther King Jr. without a Howard Thurman.
Thurman wrote 21 books and hundreds of sermons and articles about the connection between spiritual renewal and social change, about the unity of all creation, the building of community, and the search for common ground. Now, more than 20 years after his death in 1981, Howard Thurman is finding a new audience.
I think there is greater resonance today for many of the themes in his thought, which only goes to show us that Dr. Thurman was way out ahead of his generation. And he is, in fact, was a 21st century theologian working in the middle of the 20th century.
Howard Thurman was born at the turn of the last century in segregated Daytona, Florida. He was raised by his grandmother, a former slave. Despite racial and economic obstacles, Thurman graduated from Morehouse and then Colgate-Rochester Divinity School in New York State. In 1932, he was appointed dean of the chapel at Howard University in Washington. In 1935, Thurman led an African-American delegation to South Asia. In India, he and his wife met Mahatma Gandhi. They talked about oppression and freedom and nonviolence. Gandhi asked them to sing a spiritual, "Were you there when they crucified my Lord?" Thurman returned to the United States and began reflecting about how the life and teachings of Jesus specifically applied to those facing suffering and oppression. In 1949, he synthesized that thinking in one of his best-known books, Jesus and the Disinherited.
The message of the book is basically in the form of a question. What does the message of Jesus have to say to those who backs are against the wall?
And that was his big theme, the backs against the wall.
Right,
Came up again
right.
and again.
And for Martin Luther King Jr., of course, this is so relevant.
According to some reports, King carried the book during his civil rights protests. King particularly connected to Thurman's teachings about nonviolence as a way to overcome evil. King interacted with Thurman while studying at Boston University. In 1953, Thurman had become dean of BU's Marsh Chapel, the first African-American academic dean at a predominantly white university. In correspondence and meetings, Thurman supported King's efforts, but urged him and other civil rights leaders to maintain a spiritual life.
Dr. Thurman began to challenge these clergy never to lose their rooting in spiritual practices such as meditation, prayer, singing, celebration and worship, and silence. That was an unusual note to have sounded during the rancor of the civil rights movement.
I think his best contribution was his ability, for many other people were doing in our culture, to bring together the inner life, the life of passion, the life of fire, with the external life, the life of politics.
Some activists criticized Thurman for not personally marching or getting more visibly involved in the civil rights struggle.
I think the exact statement was, we thought he would be the Moses of our people, but now he's gone into this mystical stuff.
Thurman believed social change would only come through personal transformation and spiritual disciplines, such as meditation.
At the time Howard Thurman began writing and expressing the mystical side, it was very rare to even use the language of it in our culture. He was able to go deep inside himself and reach out and teach other people how to transcend the limits of their own, I'll call it, practical existence.
Another lifelong theme for Thurman was bringing people together across racial, cultural, and religious lines. In 1944, he co-founded the Church for the Fellowship of All Peoples in San Francisco, the nation's first intentionally interracial, interdenominational church.
The sense of community then seems to me to be a part of the creative intent of the Creator.
Today, Thurman's books are being re-released, and his work is getting new attention.
And this is one of my favorite shots.
Boston independent filmmaker Arle Prelo is producing a documentary about Thurman.
Well, I've always heard this, that Thurman's message is both timeless and timely. As people are wondering, how can I work with this person in the workplace that comes from a totally different culture? People in religion, how can I really acknowledge this person's faith yet maintain my own? And Thurman was really addressing and wrestling with those issues throughout his life.
Others agree Thurman may be more relevant than ever. In the days after September 11th, Robert Franklin says he found himself turning again to the classic Thurman book, Meditations of the Heart.
Life goes on. Over and over, we must know that the real target of evil is not destruction of the body, the reduction to rubble of cities. The real target of evil is to corrupt the spirit of man and to give to his soul the contagion of inner disintegration, to drink in the beauty that is within reach, to clothe one's life with simple deeds of kindness, to keep alive a sensitiveness to the movement of the Spirit of God in the quietness of the human heart and in the workings of the human mind. This is, as always, the ultimate answer to the great deception.
Sounds as if it could have been written
Absolutely.
September 12th.
Indeed, indeed. And this is the voice of the pastor speaking to the desolation of the city, to ground zero, to wherever evil has touched innocent life.
Franklin says the nation that came to embrace Martin Luther King Jr. would also benefit from embracing his spiritual mentor, Howard Thurman. I'm Kim Lawton in Atlanta.
Okay, so I'm going to hand the mic over to Beverne. And just okay, go ahead, Beverne.
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. I come to you from the Howard Thurman Center for Transformational Ministry and Social Justice here at Hartford International University. I hope you've had an opportunity to see the building that has been purchased in the open house. And if you are a student on campus, I have a lot of Howard Thurman books in my office. So if you wanted to borrow something, read it, feel free to stop by or email me and ask me for it. But we paused today to remember Howard Thurman close to his birthday. And we paused to just focus on what he called peacemaking in times of trouble. We are often surrounded by chaos and turmoil, and everywhere we look, there's trouble. Trouble in homes, trouble in schools, troubles in our place of worship and reverence, trouble in our communities, trouble in our country, trouble in the world. Despite all of this trouble, sometimes we get to enjoy moments of happiness, and sometimes we find moments of peacefulness. There is a way to have enduring peace, in the midst of the chaos, in the midst of the turmoil. As we pause today, let us become mindful of how we can assert peace in ourselves. We cannot take up the charge of peacemaking if we ourselves cannot find the peace that passes all understanding. Shalom, the peace that passes all understanding. It is simply indescribable. But once you feel it, you know it, and you never want to let that level of peace go. It is an anchoring peace that no matter what the chaos or turmoil is going on around you, you are in the eye of a storm. You are under the trough of the wave, or you're inside the bouncing bubble, the bubble bouncing on air. The chaos is there. The turmoil is there. You can see it all, and you can feel the effects of it, but deep inside, you're at peace. So Thurman says, creating inner peace takes real work, self-reflection, self-examination, and a brutal honesty with oneself. He relays that creating an island of peace within one's soul is essential to one's stability. To quote Thurman, here brings for review the purposes and the dreams to which one's life is tied. This is a place where there is no pretense, no dishonesty, and what one really thinks and feels about what one's own life stands revealed. What one really thinks and feels about other people, far and near, is seen with every nuance honestly labeled. Love is love, hate is hate, fair is fair. Well, within the island is a temple where God of one's heart dwells. Into God's presence, one comes with all of one's problems and faces scrutiny. Thurman posits who one is, what one's plans are, and where lies one's authenticity, how one's life proceeds, is all available in the temple on that island of peace. Thurman states that it is foolish and terrible if one has not found one's island of peace within one's own soul. It means that one is living without the discovery of one's true home. We have lost the art of self-reflection, contemplative prayer, journaling, earthing, and simply just being in the moment. We let life run us instead of us directing life so that we design our time to encompass quietude and solace, reviewing the good in our lives, exercising our muscles of faith during challenges, and gratefully appreciating what exists around us every day in nature and in the spaces we call home. We rarely eat our bites to savor the taste or the texture of our sustenance. We rarely just stand outside barefoot on the earth or barefoot in the sand to ground us. We rarely stop and just take a breath as we observe the goings on objectively. We rarely take time to look at each other and simply radiate a smile. In consideration of our commitment here at HIU to create harmony, and as we make contact with others and foster communication, we endeavor to find ways to cooperate with one another and offer opportunities for conciliation. I'm going to ask you to just go back one slide, please. Thank you. And then we share our peace-building mission and vision into the world. What good is that if we ourselves are in turmoil? What good is our work if we pursue it with a lack of stability? What good is our education if we're anxious over everything and settled by nothing? What good is it if we lack faith in the author of life and the creator of the universe? that is bigger than ourselves. The movement of the Spirit of God in the hearts of men and women often calls them to act against the spirit of their times or causes them to anticipate a spirit which is yet in the making. In a moment of dedication, they are given wisdom and courage to dare a deed that challenges and to kindle a hope that inspires. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. I submit to my God that I believe in with a childlike wonder and trust that my God provides me an island of peace that passes all understanding. I have a joy that endureth pain. I have a growing faith that offers me stability. I don't pretend to know the future, and I don't try to undo the past. I attempt to stay mindful in the present. And when the waves of anxiety and worry assail me, I head right back to the indwelling temple to do the self-reflective work in contemplative prayer. I assert these are the ways to develop an enduring peace. Shalom, my friends. May peace be with you, and blessed are the peacemakers. I'd like to take this time to invite us into a moment of silence as we contemplate what's going on around us and how we can find that inner peace that keeps us stable so we could continue doing the work we do here at HIU of peace building. Amen.
Okay, thank you, Beverne. So we're just going to open it up now for question and answers. Anybody?
And if you can go back to the second slide, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely, yeah. Let me just share my screen. Second slide, let's see. Oh, this one right here? Okay. Let's see.
So I know Cleo is online. So if there are any questions that are asked about Howard Thurman that I cannot answer for you, Dr. Robertson, I'm asking you to jump in. And Reverend Cheston, you may jump in as well.
I had a question / observation. I'm the student services manager here. My name's Eamon. Could you actually just flip to the other slide where he said the quote from the last slide, I think? Yeah. That one, yeah, the movement of the Spirit of God. One more to the right.
Yeah, this one.
Yeah. I liked that quote. Because I think he's talking about peace, but he's also talking about acting against the spirit of their times. And I think sometimes peace is conflated with a lack of conflict. And I think it's, to me, what Thurman is saying here is, in fact, the opposite, that sometimes peace building requires embracing conflict and embracing discomfort. So I just wanted to see maybe if Beverne or, you know, Cleo or anyone else had any observations about that. Thanks.
So the one thing that I would say, and I chose this was not in my original presentation, and this morning I got up and it was on my mind to put it in. And I actually thought of you, Amon, when I was putting this in, because the thing is, you have to have stability from inner peace before you can act against the spirit that's walking or causing conflict around you. If you are not stable and you're not standing in a place of peace, then you will get caught up with the times and you will not be able to stand firmly and be objective in the work of peace building that you have to do in that moment. It starts from within.
And if no one else has any, I actually had a question. If you can speak on this. So this concept of like the mystical side of religion, we hear this across different traditions, and Thurman was described as a mystic or passing on mystical teachings even to Martin Luther King and being his spiritual advisor. Can you speak a little bit more to that? What does that mean exactly? Like, how's that different than, say, spiritual or what is, what is the mystical aspect that he passed on or that he encompassed?
Well, first, let's figure out what mysticism actually means. And that is the practice of meditation and contemplative prayer and earthing and grounding oneself to realize that you are part of creation and you have a creator and everything around you is created. All the negativity that comes from mysticism actually comes from colonialism, the effect of colonialism on all of our different religions. Because for a time in the world, that was the most exported, I don't know, theory, entity, way of living life. I'm not sure. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with resting in a moment and waiting until you feel like you're one with creation and creator before you act. And I'm going to ask Dr. Robertson to jump in here for a minute. Dr. Robertson?
You're muted, Dr. Robertson.
While Cleo's figuring it out, activism should be rooted in faith. And one of the things that Howard Thurman impressed on the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King was to ensure that his activism was always rooted in faith.
I think for Howard Thurman, he combined what we would probably think of as two bipolar ideas, and that was the idea of activism and also mysticism. I mean, Luther Williams, who writes I think a definitive biography on him, calls him a mystic activist. And for him, Jesus was the paradigm of that, particularly in Jesus and the Disinherited. It wasn't a retreat, because normally we think of mysticism, we think it as a retreat from social issues. But for him, for Thurman, it was a grounding in his humanity. Jesus as the paradigmatic human, connected to God, and then looking at fear, anger, oppression, and really connecting the experience of ancient Judaism to that of the African American oppression, being in a colonial kind of scenario. And so it wasn't for Thurman, it wasn't either or, but it was both and. in a fascinating way, because we normally just don't think of an activist being a mystic. But I think Jesus, as an example for Thurman, I think actually concretizes that. So I think for Thurman, it's not either or, but both and.
Thank you, Dr. Robertson.
One second, let me just, okay.
Thanks.
Yep.
This is Dr. Dayhill. I really appreciated this community prayer and invitation into Thurman's legacy, and have found great inspiration myself in another sort of, as Dr. Robertson was saying, of holding together what sometimes people consider opposites, but he does the same thing with his bringing together of creation and social justice. And so often people split those apart, and we think you can't do both, but for him, it's all one love and one grounding. And you use his language of earthing, and that's been so powerful for me too. And I've found great inspiration in his witness as one of the greatest, if not the greatest, nature mystic of the Christian tradition. And we need his mystical vision, because it allows us to see, and he's also a great, I believe, pioneer of what we today call intersectionality, for that reason of holding together to say that, and finding common cause with creation and God in creation, precisely in his resistance of human injustice and oppression and conflict or divisions. So he's a great model for how powerful and healing it is to let the scope of our prayer and our mysticism expand all the way into the created world. I'm grateful for his witness and for your bringing that piece out today too. In fact, if it's okay to say, Dr. Robertson and I are talking about hosting a symposium between our two centers, Transformative Spirituality and the Howard Thurman Center, on Thurman as a nature mystic. So again, bringing together.
That's great. I look forward to that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Cahill.
Okay, thank you, Beverne. Thank you, everyone, for your thoughts. We're going to stop the community prayer portion and begin the holy ground. If you can stay in